Welcome to my podcast, Scientist Free from Religion. This podcast has as proposal, as main idea to talk about a scientific topic but also talk about religion. Different from the common assumption in which science and religion should be separated, here on this podcast we recognize formally that science and religion are not disconnected. Sadly, religion can be a very big threat to science. So on this podcast, the proposal is to talk about it freely, so without fear, without the illusion that they are separate topics. So we are going to cover a possible topic. And most of them will be focused on the connection between religion and science, especially to defend science. That's our goal. Our goal here is to defend science from religion and to help to make science, to spread scientific thinking, especially to defend it against religion.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit, I've been staring at the notes for today's session for about 20 minutes, just trying to figure out the best way to open this up.
It's a heavy one today.
It really is. Because usually, we take a stack of articles on tech or history, maybe some obscure psychological trend, and we unpack it. It's fun, it's light. But today, we're walking straight into the middle of a minefield.
It does feel a bit like we're entering the lion's den, doesn't it?
A lion's den where the lions are philosophers, theologians, scientists, and they've been fighting over this exact same bone for about 3,000 years. We're tackling one of the oldest, heaviest, and frankly, most argumentative questions in human history. It's the kind of question that just stops a dinner party dead in its tracks. You know the one I mean.
I have a pretty good feeling I do. It's the big G question, isn't it?
It is. But specifically, the implications of the big G question. The question is this. If there is no God, if we assume, just for the sake of this deep dive, that we live in a purely natural universe, is there any reason, any real, solid, objective reason to be moral?
Right, the idea that without a divine rule book, it all falls apart.
Exactly. To put it another way, if you take religion out of the picture, does right and wrong just dissolve into a matter of opinion? Does it just become, I like chocolate, you like vanilla, I like charity, you like murder?
It's the classic Dostoevsky dilemma. If God does not exist, everything is permitted. That fear runs incredibly deep in our culture.
It does.
It's the fear that without a divine police officer, we're just hairless apes throwing morality at the wall to see what sticks.
Exactly. And that terrifies people. It implies that goodness is just a fairy tale we tell ourselves to keep from eating each other. But, and this is a massive but, today we are diving into a stack of research that says no. That fear is completely unfounded.
We are looking specifically at Chapter 14 of the anthology The End of Christianity.
Right.
It's a chapter titled Moral Facts Naturally Exist and Science Could Find Them, written by the historian and philosopher Dr. Richard Carrier.
And what Carrier is proposing here is pretty radical, at least for people who are used to that traditional divide between science and ethics. He's arguing that morality isn't a matter of divine command. And it's not just personal opinion or cultural relativity. Mm-hmm. He believes morality is a matter of empirical fact.
Empirical fact.
Now, pause there. When I hear empirical fact, I think of gravity. I think of water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I think of things you can drop on your foot. Is he really saying morality is like that?
Surprisingly, yes. That is exactly the comparison he wants you to make. He argues that moral truths are objective facts about the world that can be discovered, tested, and verified. Just like medicine or engineering.
Just like engineering.
Yeah, he thinks we can put thou shalt not kill under a microscope, metaphorically speaking, and prove it's true in the exact same way we prove smoking causes cancer.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic immediately here. Because I was always taught, and I think most people were taught, that science deals with what is. Atoms, cells, planetary orbits, the stuff that physically exists. And philosophy or religion deals with what ought to be. How we should treat each other. Science describes the stage, and religion writes the script. Carrier is saying science can just cross that line.
He's saying the line itself is a bit of a myth, a persistent illusion. His mission in this text is to unpack how we can logically prove that an ought comes from an is, and why he believes that science is actually better equipped to tell us right from wrong than religion ever was.
Well, that is a bold mission statement. I mean, if he's right, it essentially renders thousands of years of theological debate obsolete. It changes everything about how we view ethical debates. So we need to take this apart piece by piece. Where do we even start?
We have to start with that barrier you just mentioned, that stay-in-your-lane sign that philosophy holds up to science. It's often attributed to the philosopher David Hume.
The famous is-ought problem.
Exactly. Hume's argument, broadly interpreted, is that you cannot validly deduce an ought from an is.
Right, the 18th century buzzkill. Remind us what his specific beef was.
So no matter how many facts you stack up about the world, how many descriptions of biology or physics or sociology you have, you can never magically squeeze a moral command out of them. Just because something is a certain way doesn't mean it ought to be that way.
I totally get the intuition there. Like, just because cancer exists, that's an is, doesn't mean we ought to have cancer. Or just because humans have a long history of violence doesn't mean we ought to be violent.
Precisely. It's often used as a shutdown argument in debates. If a scientist says, hey, evolution shows we are a cooperative species, a philosopher might say, well, that's just a description of what is. It doesn't tell us we ought to cooperate. Maybe we ought to fight our nature.
Right.
But Carrier argues that this objection, while it sounds really smart, is demonstrably false in practice. He says we derive ought from is all the time in our daily lives. We just don't notice we're doing it.
Really? I feel like I'd notice if I was solving a major philosophical crisis while making my morning coffee. Give me a real-world example of this.
Carrier uses what philosophers call hypothetical imperatives. Let's take a car mechanic. Imagine you take your car into the shop. It's making that terrible grinding noise.
I know that noise.
The mechanic opens the hood. That's the physical reality that he uses. He sees the oil is basically sludge. The engine is overheating.
Okay. I've been there. It's not a fun as else to deal with.
No, it's not. Now, based on the laws of physics and mechanics, which are purely factual descriptions of the world, the mechanic tells you if you want this car to run, you ought to change the oil.
Okay, I see. He's giving me a command. Change the oil.
But notice the structure there. It's a conditional statement. Premise 1, which is a fact, the car needs oil to run. Premise 2, another fact, you want the car to run. Conclusion, you ought to change the oil.
That makes sense.
That ought isn't a magical command from the heavens. It's not an opinion. It's a description of the necessary steps to achieve a specific result.
But wait, is that really a moral ought? That sounds like a practical ought. Like, sure, if I want to bake a cake, I ought to buy flour. But that's not the same as you ought not to murder. One is a recipe, the other is a commandment.
Hold that thought, because Carrier argues they're actually the exact same mechanism. But let's look at another example he uses to solidify the science part of this.
Yeah.
The bridge builder.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you're an engineer, you look at the properties of materials. That's science. That's the is. You know that brittle concrete crumbles under tension. You know that steel has high tensile strength. These are objective facts about the universe. Therefore, if you want a bridge that stands up and carries traffic, you ought not to use brittle concrete. You ought to use steel or reinforced concrete.
Right, and nobody argues with the engineer. Nobody stands on the side of the construction site yelling, hey, stop imposing your steel values on that innocent cement. Maybe the cement identifies as strong.
Exactly. You don't see protesters saying, that's just your opinion, man, because the ought is objectively true based on the goal. If you use the wrong concrete, the bridge falls. That is a fact. Physics enforces the ought.
Okay, so in the realm of engineering and mechanics, ought just means the thing you have to do to get the result you want.
Yes. And Carrier extends this to medicine as well. Think about a surgeon. Fact, bacteria cause infection and death. Fact, we want to save the patient. Conclusion, the surgeon ought to sterilize their instruments.
Okay, so Carrier's saying that these are imperative facts. They aren't opinions. If a surgeon doesn't wash their hands, they are objectively wrong about how to achieve surgery. They are failing at the task.
Precisely. And here's where the scientific connection comes in. Who is best at discovering these causal links? Who is best at figuring out that bacteria cause infection, or that brittle concrete fails, or that sludge ruins engines?
Science, obviously. That's what science is. It's the study of cause and effect.
All right, so science studies two things here. First, it studies physics and biology to understand the causal connections. If I do X, Y happens. Second, and this is the part people forget, psychology and sociology study what people actually want. So if an imperative is do X to get Y, and science confirms that doing X actually causes Y, then that imperative is an objective fact of the world.
Okay, I'm with you on cars, bridges, and surgery. I can see the if-then logic perfectly. But I still have this nagging feeling that morality is different. It feels fuzzier. It feels different to say you ought to change your oil versus you ought to be kind to strangers. One feels like a manual, the other feels like virtue.
It feels different because the machine is more complex. A car engine is simple. A human society is incredibly complicated. But Carrier argues the logical structure is identical. To prove it, she takes a hard look at the competition. He decides to deconstruct how religious morality works to show that it's actually doing the exact same thing.
Oh, this is where it gets spicy. He decides to take on the God did it argument on its own turf.
He does. And he argues that religious morality is also based on this exact same is-ought structure, even if believers don't realize it. He wants to show that all morality is hypothetical imperative.
How does that break down? Because usually religious people say, I do it because God commanded it, full stop. They don't usually say, I do it because if I don't, X will happen.
Don't they? Think about the basic Christian pitch. Why should you be moral? Why should you obey the Ten Commandments?
Well, usually the argument underneath it all is because if you don't, there are consequences. Judgment, hell. Or if you do, there's heaven.
Right. It's not just a blank command, it's a transaction. So let's map that onto our mechanic formula. Premise 1, if you do X, like sin, God will send you to hell. Premise 2, if you do Y, be good, God will send you to heaven.
Okay.
Premise 3, you want to go to heaven more than you want to go to hell. Conclusion, therefore, you ought to do Y.
Wow. When you lay it out like that, it really is just the car mechanic argument. If you want the car to run and go to heaven, change the oil, meaning don't kill people.
Exactly. It is a hypothetical imperative. It depends on a goal, heaven, and a mechanism, God's judgment. But Carrier points out a fatal flaw in the religious version. And this is where he thinks science wins.
What's the flaw?
For this moral system to be valid, the premises have to be factually true.
Ah, I see where this is going.
In the car example, we can prove that dirty oil ruins the engine. We can demonstrate it. You can see the broken piston. In the religious example, Carrier argues there is zero empirical evidence for the existence of heaven, hell, or a God who reacts to specific behaviors.
Right. We don't have a peer-reviewed study showing that picking up sticks on the Sabbath leads to eternal damnation. We have old books, but we don't have data.
Yeah, we don't have the data. And Carrier uses a great comparison here to show why this matters.
Yeah.
He says a non-motivating Christian morality is no different from a Pythagorean morality that forbids eating beans.
Wait, back up. Pythagoras, the triangle guy.
The very same.
He forbade beans.
He did. The ancient Pythagoreans believed eating beans was wrong. There are different theories why. Maybe they thought beans looked like embryos, or they caused gas, which disturbed the soul.
Disturbed the soul. Okay.
But imagine I come to you today and say, you ought not to eat beans.
I'd ask why.
And I say, because it disturbs the cosmic harmony and injures your soul.
I'd probably say, I don't believe that, and I'd put some beans in my chili.
Exactly. Because the consequence isn't verified, the ought vanishes. You have no reason to obey. Carrier says Christianity is in the same boat. It prescribes a cure, religious rules, without verifying the disease, which is sin, or the mechanism of the cure. It's like voodoo medicine.
That's a harsh comparison, voodoo medicine.
He means it in the sense of prescribing a ritual to fix a physical problem without understanding the cause. If I tell you to dance around the fire to cure your flu, and you want to be cured, you might do it. But if I can't prove that dancing cures the flu, my advice is bad advice.
So if the consequences, heaven and hell, aren't real, or if we can't prove they are real, then the reason to follow the rule disappears. The ought crumbles because the carity is missing.
Yes. And there is another layer to this. Even if the consequences were real, what if you didn't care? What if you were a rebel who preferred hell? Or what if you simply didn't want to worship that specific type of deity? If the want isn't there, the ought dissolves.
Just like if I don't care about my car running, the mechanic's advice to change the oil is useless to me. I can just say, let it burn.
Exactly. This leads Carrier to a very important conclusion about religion versus science. He asserts that Christianity fails as a moral foundation, not because it's unspiritual, but because it cannot verify its claims of cause and effect. It relies on invisible mechanisms. Science, however, deals exclusively with verifiable cause and effect.
So if we want a morality that is actually true, meaning based on real consequences in the real world, we have to ditch the supernatural and look at the natural.
That's his argument. We need to look at what actually happens to humans when they kill or steal or love or help.
Okay, but this brings us to a huge precipice. If we're shifting from obey God to avoid hell to something else, what replaces the heaven and hell motivation? Because if science is going to find moral facts, it needs to define what morality actually is in a secular world. If it's not God's law, what is it?
This is the crux of the chapter. We need a definition of ought that works without a God. Carrier dives into a distinction between two big philosophical concepts, internalism and externalism.
Hey there, thanks for being around. We are going to make a small break. I'm going to share with you my books. I have several books. So far, all my book about religion, atheism, which have been published a lot, they are in Portuguese, which is my main focus. But if you are interested, you can still buy my books to help me to support my work. I have several books. For example, one book that I'd like to recommend now is AI by Sci-Fi. AI by Sci-Fi is a book that talks about artificial intelligence, which is everyone is talking about artificial intelligence with ChatGPT, all this amazing stuff that they can do. They can talk, they can create video, they can create podcasts. This podcast, for example, there are several episodes that was recorded using artificial intelligence, which is amazing how I can do that. I can even interact as you could see in several episodes. So I would like to invite you to buy my book AI by Sci-Fi. It's available on Google Books, Google Play. It's also available on Amazon. So you can buy my book. If you are interested in something a little bit more complex, a little bit more technical, I do have as well technical book. For example, I have one book about computational thinking, in which I talk about Kasparov. It's a technical book. Greg Kasparov was the first guy to be beaten by a computer. He has a very nice book about that, how artificial intelligence overturned the difference between human and artificial intelligence. So please buy my book and offer me all the support. You can find all of them on Amazon. Hopefully in the future I'm going to write also about religion, atheism and science, but I do have a podcast, I do have a blog called the Scientists Free from Religion, the same name of the podcast, and you can find several already publications about several topics in which talk about science, religion and atheism. So hope you enjoyed the show. So let's come back to the show.
Boy, isms. Okay, let's unpack those terms. They sound a bit academic, but I have a feeling they're crucial here.
They are. Let's start with the one Carrier rejects, externalism. Externalism is the idea that a moral rule exists outside of you, floating in the universe, independent of your mind, and you should obey it even if you have no reason to want to.
Like a speed limit sign on a deserted road.
Sort of, but even more abstract. It's like saying it is an objective fact that you shouldn't wear white after Labor Day, regardless of whether you care about fashion or history or what anyone thinks. It's a rule that demands obedience just because. Carrier calls this fiction. He says it's incoherent.
Incoherent how?
Well, think about it. If you have absolutely no motive to obey a rule, no desire that is satisfied by it, no consequence you care about, no internal drive to follow it, will you obey it?
No, why would I? It's just noise at that point.
Exactly. If a rule doesn't connect to a motivation, it has no hold on you. Carrier says a moral system that claims to be binding but offers no motivation is like a law with no police and no benefit. It's imaginary, so he rejects externalism.
Okay, so he tosses out the rules floating in space theory. What is internalism then?
Internalism is the view that morality is based on intrinsic motives. Carrier argues that ultimately we always do what we most want to do.
Wait, hold on. Stop the tape. Do what we most want to do. That sounds like hedonism. That sounds like if I want to steal that TV because I want a TV, I should steal that TV. How is that morality? That sounds like the purge.
That is the most common objection. It sounds like pure selfishness or egoism. If good is just what I want, then isn't a serial killer good because he wants to kill?
Exactly. If internalism just means follow your bliss, then we're in big trouble.
But Carrier introduces a massive, critical caveat here. The whole theory rests on this. It's the rational and informed condition.
The rational and informed condition. Break that down for me.
Okay. Carrier argues that we often don't know what we truly want because we are ignorant or irrational. Let's go back to the car. You might want to drive your car without stopping for maintenance because you are lazy or in a hurry. You have an immediate desire, don't stop at Jiffy Lube.
Guilty. I hate stopping.
But you also want a working car. That is a deeper, more permanent desire.
Yeah.
If you were fully informed that skipping this oil change would 100% blow your engine in 10 miles, leaving you stranded in the rain with a $5,000 repair bill, would you still skip it?
No, of course not. because my desire for a working car and saving money overrides my desire to be lazy for 20 minutes.
Exactly. The only reason you would skip the oil change is if you're ignorant of the consequence. You didn't know the engine was about to blow, or irrational, you knew it, but you just couldn't make your brain accept reality.
Okay, I follow. So my true desire is the one I would have if I wasn't being an idiot.
Harsh, but yes. True morality, according to Carrier, isn't what you want right this second with your limited perspective. It's what you would want if you were fully rational and possessed all the relevant information about the consequences.
So it's not about my immediate impulse. It's about my deep, long-term well-being.
Correct. Carrier argues that when you look at human beings, really look at our biology and psychology, scientific inquiry suggests that when we are rational and informed, we don't value chaos and cruelty. We value things like compassion, integrity, cooperation, and safety.
Because those things lead to the kind of life we actually want to live.
Yes. Virtue isn't some arbitrary hoop to jump through to please a god. Virtue is efficient. Compassion works better than cruelty for social animals like us. Honesty works better than lying for building the relationships we crave.
So let me try to apply this. If I'm acting like a jerk, say I'm cheating on my taxes and lying to my spouse, Carrier would say what?
He would say, you're not just being evil in a spiritual sense, you're being stupid.
Ouch.
Or, more politely, you are operating on a mistake. You are in error. You think cheating will make you happy because you get more money or freedom. But if you were fully informed about the psychological toll, the anxiety of getting caught, the erosion of trust, the eventual social retaliation, and the loss of your own self-respect, you would realize that cheating is actually contrary to your own deepest desires.
That is a fascinating shift. It turns immorality into a calculation error. It makes sin a math problem.
It does. It intellectualizes morality. It says that evil is essentially ignorance of what truly fulfills you.
Which brings us back to science. Because if morality is about figuring out, A, what we deeply want, and B, what behaviors actually achieve that, who is the expert on those two things?
Science, not the priest. Science. Science can study human nature to find out what makes us flourish, that's the want, and science can study sociology, game theory, and cause and effect to tell us which behaviors get us there.
Okay, I'm following the logic. It's a compelling picture, but I have to play devil's advocate here. In fact, I have to play the ultimate devil's advocate. Carrier brings up this moral worry, and I think it's very valid. What if science investigates what makes us happy and concludes, you know what, slavery is actually great?
Right, the slavery objection. This is the fear that stops people cold. It's the fear that if we let facts dictate morality, the facts might turn out to be something horrible.
Exactly. I mean, imagine a study comes out, peer-reviewed. Oppressing a minority group makes the majority super happy and boosts the economy. Does that make slavery moral? Because under Carrier's system, if it satisfies the majority's desires, isn't it the right thing to do?
This is where we have to be very careful, and Carrier tackles this head on. First, he points out that this is an irrational fear, similar to refusing to study physics because you're afraid it might prove the Earth is flat, meaning we have to follow the evidence where it leads. If we are committed to truth, we can't decide the answer before we ask the question. If the universe was built in a way that slavery was the only path to happiness, then, well, that would be a terrible universe, but it would be the truth.
That is a terrifying thought.
It is. But Carrier argues that this fear is scientifically unfounded. We don't live in that universe.
How does he know?
He says, look at the data we already have. We have thousands of years of human history. We have psychological data. Does slavery actually produce a happy, stable, flourishing society?
Well, history would say no. It usually leads to civil war, resentment, violence, and economic stagnation. It's fundamentally unstable.
And look at the slaveholder. This is a key point. It's easy to say slavery is bad for the slave. But Carrier argues it's also bad for the master.
Bad for the master? How? He's getting free labor.
But at what cost? To maintain slavery, the master has to cultivate cruelty. He has to suppress his natural empathy. He has to live in constant paranoia of rebellion. He has to become arrogant and detached. We know, psychologically, that these traits, paranoia, lack of empathy, cruelty, are toxic to one's own well-being and contentment.
So you can't be a happy slaveholder.
Not a deeply happy one. You might have surface-level pleasure, but you lack the deep satisfaction of connection, safety, and mutual respect. Carrier argues that evidence overwhelmingly suggests that compassion and liberty are the efficient paths to human satisfaction. Science is far more likely to confirm that slavery is objectively wrong in the sense that it fails to achieve our deepest goals than to vindicate it.
So we don't need to be afraid of the answer because the data is already pointing in the good direction.
Yes, and Carey makes a strong point here. Just because we haven't finished the scientific inquiry doesn't mean the facts don't exist. We don't need to run unethical experiments, like enslaving people, just to test it, to know the answer. We have historical data. We have psychological studies. We can derive the ought from the massive amount of is we already have.
Okay, that makes sense. The slavery is good outcome is a phantom. It's scientifically unlikely. But there's another objection. I can hear listeners screaming at their speakers right now, and it's the big one.
Which is?
What about the fact that everyone is different? You know, the relativism argument. If morality is based on what I want and you want something different, don't we end up with different moralities? If I want to be a nomadic artist and you want to be a Wall Street shark, don't we have different oughts?
That is the problem of relativism. And Carrier proposes something called realist moral relativism that functionally becomes a universal morality.
Walk me through that paradox. How can it be relative and universal? That sounds like hot ice.
It starts with biology. Are you and I a different species?
I hope not, although I haven't had my DNA tested recently.
Assuming we are both Homo sapiens, we share the same fundamental machinery. We have the same brain structures, the same neurochemistry, the same hormones. This means our primary biological desires are largely the same.
You mean the basics. We all need food. We all need sleep.
Yes, but go deeper. We aren't just stomachs on legs. We are social primates. We all need social connection. We need autonomy, the feeling that we are in control of our lives. We need to feel useful. We need to be free from constant fear. Carrier argues these aren't choices. They are unalterable facts of our biology.
So I can't just decide not to need love.
Exactly. You can try, but you will become miserable. Because we cannot change our fundamental nature, these biological needs override our fleeting surface-level desires.
So deep down, we all want the same basic things because we are built from the exact same blueprints.
Correct. And then add the second factor, the environment. We all live in the same physical universe. The laws of physics, cause and effect, and sociology are the same for everyone.
Right. Gravity pulls on you the same way it pulls on me. If I punch someone, they get angry. That's a universal social reaction.
Exactly. So if we all have the same fundamental machine, the brain and body, and we all live in the same reality, the best path to satisfy that machine is likely the same for everyone.
The best path being morality.
Yes. Think of it this way. If we are all trying to drive the exact same model of car on the exact same road, the maintenance manual is going to be the same. That manual is universal morality.
But surely there are exceptions. What if I have a peanut allergy? My manual says don't eat peanuts. Your manual says eat peanuts. That's a difference.
That's a great example Carrier uses. He calls these covering laws. The universal rule isn't do not eat peanuts. The universal rule is do not eat what harms you.
Okay, I see the distinction.
For you, applying that rule means avoiding peanuts. For me, I love peanuts, so I eat them. The specific action looks different. But the moral fact, avoid harm and seek health, is the exact same.
So differences in circumstance don't disprove the rule, they just change the application.
Exactly. Context dependence is part of the science. A doctor treats a diabetic differently than a non-diabetic, but the goal, health, is universal. Carrier says morality works the same way. The superficial details change, but the core principles of cooperation, honesty, and nonviolence remain constant because they are the structural beams that hold human happiness together.
Now, you mentioned broken machines earlier. We have to talk about the outliers, the psychopaths, the people who genuinely seem to want to hurt others. Does Carrier's system break down there? Because if morality is what you would want if you were rational, what if you are rational but you just lack empathy?
This is where Carrier gets really interesting and maybe a little controversial. He classifies the true psychopath, someone who genuinely has no desire for social connection or compassion, as irrational or insane.
Insane? That's a loaded word.
He means it in the mechanical sense. Their machinery is broken. If a car's engine is missing a piston, the manual for a working car doesn't apply the same way. Carrier says we cannot persuade them morally, just as we cannot reason with a schizophrenic who is seeing hallucinations.
So the existence of blind people doesn't prove that vision isn't real.
Perfectly put. The existence of people with broken moral machinery doesn't disprove the existence of moral facts for the rest of the species. It just identifies a defect in that specific agent.
But what do we do with them? If we can't say you are evil because God says so, what do we say?
We say you are malfunctioning and dangerous. We contain them, we treat them, But we don't build our moral system around them. We don't say, well, Ted Bundy likes murder, so murder must be okay for some people. We say, Ted Bundy is objectively broken.
That's a very clinical way to look at evil. It takes the mystique right out of it.
It does. And Carrier touches on one other extreme example, aliens, or AI.
I was waiting for the aliens.
Carrier admits that a different species might have a totally different biology. If you have a species of solitary, asexual predators who eat their young gills,
Sounds like a delightful planet.
their moral facts would be very different from ours. Their maintenance manual would be different because their machine is different.
So morality is relative to the species.
Yes, but, and this is key, we aren't dealing with them. We are dealing with humans. Carrier argues that for Homo sapiens, human morality applies. We don't need to worry about Klingon ethics unless we become Klingons.
Unless we meet them.
Unless we meet them. And even then, Carrier speculates that highly evolved civilizations likely converge on similar cooperative moralities simply because cooperation is so much more powerful than conflict. But that's a speculation for another day.
Fair enough. So, let's bring this home. We've covered a lot of ground. We've established that ought comes from is through hypothetical imperatives. If you want the result, you must do the action. We've established that Christian morality fails because its is, heaven and hell, is unverified. We've established that science can find the is, what we want, and how to get it.
That's the roadmap.
So what is the final verdict here? Carrier seems to be suggesting a replacement project. He's not just critiquing, he's proposing a takeover.
He is. He's arguing that we need to replace religion with science as the absolute authority on morality.
That is going to ruffle some feathers. That is going to ruffle all the feathers.
Oh, absolutely. But look at his logic. He compares Christianity to voodoo medicine again. It distracted us. For centuries, if you got sick, people said demons or sin. They tried to cure you with prayer or exorcism or bloodletting.
And it didn't work. People kept dying.
It didn't work. Then science came along and found the real cause. Germs, viruses, genetics. Once we understood the real cause, we could find the real cure.
And Carrier thinks morality is in the same boat. We've been treating immorality with prayer when we should have been treating it with, what? Education, economics, therapy.
Exactly. He believes religious rules distract us from finding the real solutions to human misery. By focusing on sin and divine judgment, we ignore the actual sociological and psychological causes of harmful behavior. If we want less crime, we shouldn't preach about hell. We should study poverty and mental health.
So instead of praying for people to be better, we should study what conditions make people better.
Precisely. Science can discover the true moral system. Let's call it System T. This would be the set of behaviors that rational, informed human beings would overwhelmingly prefer to follow to achieve their deepest needs.
And this System T isn't written on stone tablets, it's found in data.
It's found in the data of human existence. And Carrier even includes an appendix in the book with formal deductive proofs, like logic equations, to mathematically demonstrate that if a moral system exists, it must be the one we have the most motivating reason to obey.
He brought math to a philosophy fight.
He did. He wants to show that this isn't just a nice idea, it's a logical necessity. If you accept that you have desires and you accept that there are facts about how to fulfill them, you have to accept that moral facts exist.
So let's wrap this up for you, the listener, because this is a lot to digest. We started with the fear that no God means no morality.
And we've arrived at no God means better morality.
That's the twist. The takeaway is you don't need God to be good. In fact, you might be better at being good if you stop looking at the sky and start looking at the data.
Right. Ought is just a fancy way of saying if you want X, do Y. We naturally pursue what we value most. Science helps us identify what we value most when we aren't being irrational, and it tells us how to get it. Therefore, moral facts exist naturally.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. It takes morality out of the realm of mystery and puts it into the realm of maintenance.
I like that. Moral maintenance. Keeping the engine of humanity running smoothly.
And here's a thought I want to leave you with today. Carrier's argument implies something really provocative. If morality is a science, then being immoral isn't just bad or sinful, it's basically just being wrong.
It's ignorance. It's a fundamental error.
It implies that if you are doing evil, you are technically just bad at math. You are calculating your own happiness incorrectly.
Which puts a whole new spin on empathy for bad people. They aren't demons. They are confused about how the universe works. They're trying to drive a car by pouring sand in the gas tank.
So here is the question for you to chew on. If science actually proved with hard data, that your most deeply held moral belief was actually harmful to your long-term happiness, would you have the courage to change your mind?
That is the real test of faith and truth.
Indeed it is. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.
Hey there, you arrived to the end of this episode. You can always check out my YouTube channel and also keep watching because there are 7 episodes. So you just if you enjoyed this one, hopefully you are going to enjoy the next one. I always like to remember that you can support my work by buying my books. Even though I still don't have a book about religion, which is the main topic of the podcast, I do have a book about artificial intelligence. And also I have a blog called Scientists Free from Religion on Medium. And there are several blog posts there. And you can enjoy it, you can read it. And you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can share it with your friends. So hopefully I can hear from you and hope you had an amazing time. So hope to see you in the next episode.